Hi, this is Ed Fitzpatrick. If you enjoy local politics as much as I do, be sure to join our friends at Rhode Island PBS for the show A Lively Experiment. Hosted by Jim Hummel, the weekly series features journalists, pundits, and politicians debating the stories and issues that matter most to us Rhode Islanders. Tune in to A Lively Experiment and be part of the conversation. Fridays at 7 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS and wherever you get your podcasts. From the Boston Globe, this is Rhode Island Report. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. Welcome back to the podcast where we bring you big conversations from our very small state. Big news over here at Globe Rhode Island. We're adding a new freelancer to our team, one of the state's best sports writers and radio hosts, Kevin McNamara. His first article for us comes out today. He's here to talk about his new gig and the big PC-URI game coming up on Saturday. Kevin McNamara, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Hey, to start with, I want to note how long I've known you. We went to Syracuse University together, just a couple of Rhode Island kids.
I don't think I knew you until maybe sophomore year, but I knew Donna Tuttle, right?
Donna Kenny.
Donna Kenny.
Yes.
She was a sweetheart. She was in my dorm.
Yep.
I got to know her first, and she said, well, I have a friend from Smithfield who's in communications. You need to meet Ed Fitzpatrick, and that's how we got it done.
Yes. In fact, I rode the bus to Mount St. Charles with Donna Kenny. She lived in Scituate. I lived in Smithfield. Where did you grow up?
Coventry. So we were all up and down 116, right?
Exactly. Our freshman year, did you rush the field after we beat Nebraska, the number one team in the nation?
I wasn't there.
You're kidding
me.
me.
Can I tell you the truth?
You're kidding me. Tell me the truth.
I had mononucleosis. That was like 6 weeks into my college experience. I won't say how I contracted mononucleosis. I had to go home. I went home to Rhode Island, and I missed that weekend. And it was the greatest victory of our 4 years. You know, there was a few at senior year, though, when they went undefeated and went to the Sugar Bowl.
That was a great moment. My father saw me rush the field on ESPN. Wow. But yeah, a good friend of mine, John Bologna, had mono and did not see the game same year. It must have been going around. And then we worked together at the Providence Journal. Mm-hmm. How long were you there?
I was there 31 years, maybe. Does that mean we're old, by the way?
Yeah, it's officially, we are very old. But I can't help but ask you to share a few memories of our mutual friend, the late, great Bill Reynolds. For those who didn't know him, tell us a bit about Bill.
Well, we're doing this podcast at lunchtime, and really that's how I got to know Bill. We probably went to lunch at least 200 days a year.
And Murphy's?
Murphy's was the vast majority, but there were other haunts around downtown that we would pop into. And the stories that we would share really about college basketball more than anything else, back and forth. And, you know, we had some great other guys who would tag along. Dave Bloss was a sports editor for years and years. Jim Donaldson, of course, Joe McDonald. It's just Mike Shostak. So many, great guys.
Yeah, my desk at the Journal was back there near the sports department, so I got to hang out and talk sports with all you guys. And now you're the host of the Kevin Mack Sports Hour on WPRO and 790 The Score, correct?
That's correct. Monday through Friday, 5 to 7. You want to hear some local sports? We'll talk Patriots and Red Sox and certainly the Celtics, but college basketball and some of the big local stories we definitely hit.
And you're still using your Newhouse education to write for the Kevin Mack Sports website, correct?
Yeah, I discovered that maybe to be your own boss after 31 years
it's a beautiful thing.
Can be fun, and I still really enjoy, and I appreciate all the subscribers who still like to follow me.
And now we're going to be writing for the same newspaper again, this time the Boston Globe. And so tell our listeners about the articles, freelance articles, you'll be doing about the Providence College men's basketball season.
Yeah, Ed and Dan McGowan have been double teaming me for about 2 years. We finally broke down and come to an agreement here at the Globe. I'll write a couple times a month, depending on where the news takes us, especially during college basketball season. I think it could extend beyond college basketball, maybe year-round as well, because there are an awful lot of local sports stories that go under the radar. I think the staff at Globe Rhode Island does a great job, but some sports stories get by you a little bit, which is understandable.
And this podcast will drop on Thursday, December 5th, and that will be your first article. Tell us what it's going to be about.
Well, it just happens to be the week of the biggest sporting event in Rhode Island on a yearly basis when Providence College takes on the University of Rhode Island in men's basketball. And boy, it's an interesting week. Providence is really struggling after a trip to the Bahamas. Rhode Island is undefeated. Ed, you've been down to that Ryan Center, especially when the Friars show up. It is electric. It'll be totally sold out. I'm sure the Rams are waiting for the Friars, that's for sure.
So is their record a surprise given how URI has done in the past couple of years? I mean, what's changed?
Well, college basketball these days is kind of like AAU. You used to, young Eddie from Smithfield would be a freshman and would sit on the bench, and second year as a sophomore, he'd play a little bit. And then hopefully, the fans would get to know him. And junior and senior, they're really, he becomes a legend, right?
Sure.
Now it just doesn't work that way. The patience of these kids, the transfer portal where you can go from school to school to school without sitting out, you almost have a new team or a new half of a team every season. And Archie Miller, I think, has done a great job in the transfer portal this past offseason. Some really important transfers, including one from Providence. Sebastian Thomas from Providence, Bishop Hendricken, bounced around a few other prep schools, but he did 2 years at URI, and to be honest with you, he was just too young. He was physically immature. He was a boy. Now he looks like a man and is playing really good point guard for the Rams. He's been the key addition in the offseason for sure.
Yeah, he started at URI, went off to Albany, right?
Albany for one season,
and now he's back and doing great, right?
Yes, he is.
So they're playing at URI. Tell us more about what that scene is going to be like.
Well, Saturday noontime is an interesting time.
Saturday noontime?
Yeah. They've agreed to play on this first Saturday in December for years now. Because scheduling can be such a tricky thing. Noontime is really set by television. So if, you wanted to, go to the Coast Guard House or someplace in South County for some pre-gaming, it's going to be a little trickier for noontime, but it'll be totally sold out. Providence fans find their ways in, but they don't find their ways to the very best seats. So it's definitely a pro-roadie crowd for sure. And I know, again, they will be ready for the Friars.
You can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning, as they say. So is
that what they say at Syracuse?
Maybe back in our day. But is this the only time PC and URI meet this season? I thought they used to meet more than once.
That's because you're old, Ed. They
haven't
played twice since the early 80s.
Really?
And that will never change going forward. They're in two different leagues, two different scheduling, standards and goals and whatnot. The good news is I believe they're in a long-term deal, like a 10-year deal, maybe 3-4 years in, where they will continue to play. And hopefully, God willing, will always play.
We'll have more after a quick break. When you want to go beyond the headlines, let me recommend Rhode Island PBS Weekly. Rhode Island PBS Weekly is an award-winning news magazine broadcast that gives you the full story, powered by investigative journalism and narrative storytelling. New episodes of Rhode Island PBS Weekly drop Sundays at 7:30 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS. Watch past episodes at ripbs.org/weekly. That's ripbs.org/weekly. When was the last time URI beat PC?
Yeah, it was in Kingston. It would be Dan Hurley's last year, so it's been a little while.
Has URI played any really good teams?
I'd say that's the question about Rhode Island. They played Charleston. The College of Charleston has a good program. Chris Mack's the coach, and they absolutely annihilated them. I was at that game. It was on a Sunday afternoon. Their game against Yale is a good test as well. They went on the road to a tournament down in Jacksonville and had 2 impressive wins. Nobody great, though. Providence is clearly, I think, the best team that they've played thus far this season. Flip side, the Friars played in a really big-time tournament down in the Bahamas and were knocked around pretty good by Oklahoma, Indiana, and Davidson.
So before we talk about this season, just put in perspective how big PC Friar basketball is for Rhode Island. I mean, isn't it the equivalent of our pro sports here in Rhode Island?
It is. And, I often have to explain this to anyone who lives literally from Attleboro or north, and certainly anyone in the Boston area who might be listening to this podcast. There's no question. This is the game. And this game, the governor will be at the game. I'd be shocked if he's not.
Sure.
Oftentimes, all your friends from the political world, they jockey for the best seats.
Yep.
They call in their favors and whatnot. Yep. And that's kind of the fun of it. And it's also great to see some of the former players come back. This time it would be, quite a few former Rams. After doing this for 30 years, it's great to see those guys, and they come over and say hi and whatnot. It's one of those days where your head's on a swivel because everyone's saying, "Hey, Kevin Mack." And you just go back and forth. And great to see familiar faces.
And down at the Ryan Center, I remember you always had Governor Allman was there. He was a big URI guy. But yeah, I grew up with when it was Joe Mulaney as the coach, watching Ernie D and Marvin Bonds. We've had Ernie D on the podcast with his new book. Yeah. But yeah, this is part of Rhode Island, right?
It is. And, actually, you mentioned Billy Reynolds beforehand. He was always a proponent of going back to play 2 times a year. And it would be fun. But I tell you, once these 2 teams play, and it is, again, the first week in December all the time, then they, as Billy liked to say, go their separate ways. Providence's focus is the Big East. The URI Rams focus is the Atlantic 10. And in reality, Ed, those games are much, much more important than this game. This is for bragging rights. It's more for fan bragging rights. I've already had fans saying, what are you doing after the game? Where are you going after the game?
Yep.
I'm like, don't worry. Those things will take care of themselves. Usually the winners, they want to go out after this ball game. The losers, they go back home.
So what's the outlook for this year's PC team? Where do they stand in terms of the Big East?
Yeah, they were picked 6th, and the Big East is off to really cumulatively one of the worst starts it's been off to in, I'd say, a decade. We saw Connecticut go out to the Maui Classic and lose 3 times.
Lost 3 times?
Yeah. Again, Providence went to a tournament, lost all 3 times. Creighton has had some injuries. They've lost games. Xavier got whacked the other day by Michigan. St. John's has lost a few times.
Only Marquette is doing well, right?
Marquette is ranked in the top 5, flying high. But this is a league that's been among the best in the country in the last 10 years since it went into its, as I like to say, the Catholics group. 9 of the 11 teams are Catholic schools. And, there's still a window of possibility here before they start playing each other. You have to do damage in the non-conference. That's why Providence's game at Rhode Island is very important.
So is this Friar team going to make the NCAA tournament? I know it's early, but what do you think?
It's early. I would say right now that they're definitely well behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
You need to put some of those non-conference wins in the bank to be able to impress the selection committee, or you need to just rip through the Big East. And I don't think they have that type of a team. Bottom line about this Providence team is it was built with the presumption that Bryce Hopkins would be returning from his knee injury and be a very good player. Well, Bryce hasn't played yet.
Yeah, what's the outlook there?
He's 10 months into major ACL surgery. It's about time. It's getting close, but it's far from overdue. Sometimes these injuries take a year and a half.
Sure.
Oftentimes you come back and you're not the same. And again, this Providence team not only needs Bryce Hopkins back, they need him to be an all Big East type player. So it may be a leap of faith. I thought we would have seen him a little bit by now. There's some rumblings that maybe his parents, his agent, because all these kids at a high level have agents now because of the NIL packages and whatnot.
Sure.
Maybe aren't too excited about him coming back until he's really ready to play.
And he's a future NBA player?
I would say he's an NBA prospect. I think his camp probably is a little too high on him. You need to play and show the NBA that you can play and be an NBA player. 2 years ago, he was an NBA prospect. It's 2 years ago.
Yeah, I was there at the game when he got hurt, and that sounded and looked terrible.
It was one of the worst injuries I've ever seen because it's a Providence home game.
Yep.
Literally, he's just running, trips to some degree, falls right at midcourt.
Yeah.
And it was like he got shot, in all honesty. And the place went stone cold silent.
You could hear him.
Writhing in pain. It was a really difficult scene. And I will say, obviously, getting to know Bryce the last couple of years, great young man. I wish him all the best and hope he's back in the lineup soon.
So tell us, how is the PC coach Kim English doing? Has he made us forget that other guy whose name I forget, who's down at Georgetown?
Yeah, Georgetown. I think they're in the Big East, too.
Yeah.
Circle that date, too, by when they come back up. I'd say the jury is definitely out on Kim. I like him a lot. I think he's an excellent recruiter. Last year, he was just blessed. Devin Carter was one of the best players that I've seen in a Providence uniform. A first-round draft pick, deservedly so, Big East Player of the Year. They need more Devin Carter-level players. To win at a league like the Big East is difficult. You need pros. We'll see. if Providence can keep bringing in that level of talent. That's what it takes.
Who is the best player you've ever seen in a PC uniform?
Eric Murdoch
really
was great. His senior year, he was outstanding. And again, a first-round NBA player. Eric Williams was outstanding. Had a long run in the pros.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of great players for sure.
Yeah. Am I right that the NCAA tournament's coming to Providence this year?
Clear the decks, yes. Second weekend in March. The last time it was here, Duke was the marquee team, and I was away with the Friars at the NCAA tournament. So by the time I get back, the NCAAs were gone. This year, I think I'm going to stay in Providence, even if the Friars are the number one seed in the tournament. I don't want to miss it. And I will say this, the AMP has done a great job cleaning itself up, rehabbing the locker rooms. It'll be great. It's getting too small for this NCAA tournament. For Providence games, they get 12,500. For the NCAA tournament, I'd say 11,000 max. It's a little small. And obviously, the competition to host those games is pretty intense here in New England.
Kevin McNamara, thank you for joining us today. I'm looking forward to your coverage this season.
Yeah, a couple times a month, maybe 3 times if the Friars are perking up. And hey, if the Rams stay undefeated, I'll be writing about the URI Rams. But,
exactly.
Wherever the stories take us, as per usual, Ed, and certainly great to join you.
You can read Kevin's sports coverage starting today at globe.com/Rhode Island. Rhode Island Report is a production of the Boston Globe in collaboration with Rhode Island PBS. Today's episode was produced by Megan Hall. Audio mixing and mastering by Marissa Ewing of Hemlock Creek Productions. Our music is from APM. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. See you next week. Looking to binge watch all your favorite PBS shows? You need Rhode Island PBS Passport, Masterpiece, Antiques Roadshow, Rhode Island PBS Weekly, and many more. Watch them all, anytime, and from any streaming device. Learn more about this member benefit at ripbs.org/